Before we begin, we have a short video presentation to start our event this morning.
Welcome on stage our two panelists, and while they come up I will introduce them. We have Rene and Menezez, who is the larger of the two gentlemen. Please. Rene is Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Better, and is also President of the Malaysian Digital Association. Yeah, I'll go in the middle, that's fine. And on my right, therefore, let me introduce you to the man from Google, Sajith Sivanandan. Is that good enough? Okay. Probably wasn't good enough, but anyway, he's country manager of Google, and obviously a true part of the media ecosystem. We've heard some of the sort of questions I was going to challenge you on, and I think rather than talking about sort of data, if we can focus on some of the sort of the core issues, I want to start actually with the last point that I mentioned there, which is around digital talent. Google, full of digital talent, easy to find, easy to keep. What's the secret?
So it depends on how you define digital talent, right? So if you define it as people who have prior experience in digital, yes, difficult to find. Well, when you pause to think about it, Google itself as a company is only 13 years old, right? So, I mean, can you imagine, like, our founders have been in this business just for 13 years old. So, you know, where do you go about looking for experienced talent, so to speak? So I tend to view this differently. I look for people who are analytical, who have the ability to, you know, adjust very quickly,
yeah,
who have the experience as a user, and who've done different things in their lives, you know. And when you start to look at the talent pool like that, it tends to expand a little bit. So my view is actually contrarian to this whole sort of notion of digital talent scarcity. That's a reality. But then, rather than moan and belittle ourselves about the lack of talent, in the industry, I tend to view it from the perspective that if you look for people who have the analytical ability, intellectually smart, the curiosity, I think you will suddenly find that you're speaking to a larger talent pool. Just to give you a real life sort of example, if you will, we're building our office in Malaysia. Apart from one person, it's still small. We're getting up to about 10 people. We'll grow a lot in the coming months. But apart from one person, everybody else whom we've hired don't have any digital background whatsoever. They're just, very, very smart Malaysians, very talented. Again, most of them are scholars, come back here, so on and so forth.
How old are they?
So I am the outlier in that group, which is not a good thing. It helps I look younger than my age, but I'm still reminded of. So the average age would be, I'd say, 29, 30. So I just to sort of bring that up a bit, I just recently hired. He started last week. Somebody who was 35 years old. So that helps a little bit. Yeah. But you see, I bet the partners in the room here are thinking, Jesus Christ, 35? I mean, this guy's like a starter, or something like that.
Well, because we work for an organization where our average age is 26, so we've got this taped. But it's interesting because I think the serious point that, it's a telltale sign that actually it's 29. And I'm sure if I was to say what's the average age across Google as a whole,
I know, it's a lot lesser. We're looking at now 23, 24.
Okay, so you're taking digital natives because you're still a young, rather large, but you're still a young organization.
Yeah.
But, there are a large part of the media industry which has been going for a while, and they are trying to transform themselves into a digital organization. So let me swing over here. Do you want to take up the challenge for the traditional guys?
Yeah, I think firstly with hiring, everyone should know that if you're Google, everyone sends their CVs to you, so you have a larger pool. But in general, I think there's a shortage of talent, not just digital talent. So a lot of good people leave our shores and all that for more, interesting jobs outside. When you look at the industry as a whole, there are efforts being taken to engage with the colleges and universities to ensure that the syllabus that people are studying is actually relevant and practical. But that's talking about people who are just entering the workforce. So in terms of experience and all that is something that people will need to be taught by the companies in the digital field. In terms of the challenge for traditional media, I think we're pretty lucky here in Malaysia that all the media owners in this room, from the Star to Media Prima to even the TV channels like Astro and all that stuff, all these guys have made serious moves towards digital already. The one challenge for the traditional media industry is actually a challenge that's shared by anyone in digital. And that is just basically getting people to have that confidence to put more of the money aside to make those moves that people have made from traditional to digital more rewarding.
Because it's interesting you mention that, because the data doesn't seem to reflect the activity. Now, maybe it never does, but we seem to see this huge shift in consumer loyalty towards digital, right? Everyone is engaging with digital if you get the access to it, right? And yet the ad dollars don't seem to be following. What's this gig about?
So I think if you look at the digital marketing guys or the digital industry, a lot of us has gone out and said, hey, we deserve more money for digital because there are more eyeballs online than there are on traditional channels and all that. But the whole perception of we deserve it is sort of a little bit self-serving. I think that definitely the money needs to follow the eyeballs. But today, one of the challenges that maybe we have is in terms of efficiency. We're probably too efficient for our own good. So when someone can spend a couple of $100K and get proper results that tells you how every cent of that couple of 100,000 worked for them, then there is, hey, that's enough of a spend. Do I really need to go out and spend $6 million that I would when I produce a TV commercial and then buy the airtime to run the ad? I think we've and also the other one, and Sajith, you definitely have a point of view on this as well. I think a lot of it is inertia as well, because when we started, we thought the best way to get revenue was to confuse the hell out of traditional media planners and clients and come up with an entire glossary of stuff that no one understood. And as a result, we've put ourselves in a corner, right? We speak a completely different language from every other marketing person. So the number one job in this industry should be translators.
If I may, Marcel.
I thought you would.
The fact is, advertisers, for some reason, have always been behind consumers, right? So just in terms of, you could, your video on the consumers, there were a couple of people who said, a couple of consumers who were saying that they would love to pay for content. It's just that the gentleman from Hong Kong, for instance, the deals haven't been done.
Yeah,
and this is very, very true, right,
yeah.
of what happens in our industry today. And so the problem really is that advertisers, especially decision makers, because they've grown up in the analog world at the moment, and I have a lot of friends now in advertisers who manage, let's say, digital departments or media, digital media, VP of this or head of that. There are some in this room as well. And again, the problem is I don't think they get their fair share on the table at the moment today. We haven't helped ourselves by sort of having too many terms and too many metrics. And so the CEO or the CMO of these large companies today who are making these sort of allocation decisions, if you will, they love to see a large hoarding, or they love to see a large a television campaign, or they get thrilled by seeing a full-page color ad. All of these are important mediums. I used to work in a television company for 4 odd years myself. So I know that the lure of, of having a great campaign on TV and of having, I once noticed an advertiser was extremely excited, an automobile manufacturer was extremely excited about sponsoring a show for 13 weeks because he wanted a particular TV announcer to say the brand's name in his deep voice. And this is an emotional buy, right? And nothing wrong with that. And all these mediums work. It's just that I think there seems to be, for a baffling reason, a reluctance of CEOs and CMOs to kind of accept that their businesses are behind the consumers, if you will, in terms of how they're using.
It's interesting. So I had this sort of conversation a couple of times before, and it's always going like this. Right? Everyone's always pointing somewhere else, right? So media owners tend to point at their agencies because they don't get anything, or the media buyers, right? And then you point at the CMO, right? So what's all this about? I mean, is it just as simple as it's your fault?
No. So like I said, I think we're all complicit in this. The problem really is that I guess there are a lot of relationships at stake. And that, makes change a little harder to do than, let's say, it has happened in your mature markets or in some of those other markets.
That's a fair point.
So relationships are very, very, difficult to kind of be subject to figures and to be subject to data. In fact, I think that those of salespeople in television and newspapers seem to have done a wonderful job of deepening those relationships. People from Sinchu and Star here, clearly their sales teams are doing a great job of engaging with advertisers and helping them see what more they could do on newspapers. So I think it's sort of, I'm not sure who should kind of where the first step really lies, other than saying that I think all of us need to slowly but surely recognize, it takes the CEO or the CMO to recognize that 10 years out, there will only be digital natives.
Correct.
And so when do you push the button, so to speak, to do that? It takes a very enlightened chairman of an agency to say 10 years out, This part, our analog part of our business, is probably going to give us 10-15% of our revenue, and so on and so forth. So who makes the first move really is going to be.
Well, and is it the head of the agency or is it the CMO?
Yeah, well.
If we go back, I'm really intrigued by your point, though, that you think you've been too efficient. Too efficient means does that mean you're too cheap?
So I think the perception out there from years and years of online marketing opportunities is that we are cheap, the perception. We're actually, whatever media you find online, the bulk of it is actually very cost efficient in comparison. And cost efficiency and cheap sort of gets confused very often. The cost efficiency comes from that innate ability to track almost every cent that you spend. And with that kind of transparency, then there's a tendency to get focused onto the nitty-gritty. So, very often if you do any form of traditional media, a basic report that comes in maybe every quarter or whatever on how your spending has impacted your sales or whatever is sufficient.
It was interesting. I'm glad you said that, because I was actually going to pick up. Surely, when we talk about, I kind of laid you down an unfair, because I started talking about cheap and you took it up. But actually, surely what we're now talking about is not space and how much is space. What we're talking about is a journey on the path to purchase. Yep. And the key thing is about defining what are those trigger points on those paths to purchase, and how does a marketing dollar impact that. So that the issue is around defining those points to purchase. Is that fair? So it's rather valuing those points to purchase rather than valuing space.
Yeah, definitely.
So for the longest time, I think also again our industry, and then from an attribution perspective, there's always the whole issue of last click attribution. Again, for those of you not familiar, basically the last click that takes the consumer to your page and where they convert tends to get an undue share of credit. But the fact is that consumer has actually maybe read something in situ, has then searched, has then maybe seen a hoarding, has maybe then seen friends talk about it on Facebook, so on and so forth. So a consumer goes through a multi-dimensional path, if you will, before they get to that final journey. So
exactly.
So how do you value every point on this path to purchase? Is a very, very interesting problem.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that globally that move is being made already. Yeah. So if you look at the US, that company DG, which manages all the scheduling platforms for TV stations and all that, went out and bought MediaMind, which tracks does third-party tracking and serving of online creative and video and all that, in the hope that in the near future they're able to schedule video campaigns both online and on TV with that same single planning platform, and also track some form of response through a singular platform. I think cross-media, optimization or results or data is going to be the key.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us have changed our tune from about 5-6 years ago to talk about the death of other media and all that stuff. It's still going to be around, but every medium is going to have its own role to play. And some campaigns, or for some advertisers, digital may be the first thing, right? And for others, it may be the last thing.
Yeah, because let's say, you talked about the guy who wanted to have a news anchor saying in a very dark voice, It's the George Clooney effect on Nescafe, right? But surely a cool viral ad. Everyone wants that ultimate viral ad, don't they?
Sure. So that's simply because it's very sexy, right? Who here hasn't heard of the Old Spice sort of set of this? Well, for every one Old Spice, I can tell you this. We have data. There are 1,000 non-Old Spices. There are 1,000 failures, right? So this is again. Everybody wants that viral thing, but a couple of things. One, most brands are unprepared to invest in making sure that it can go viral. Because you can't just have a guy like Isaiah take off his clothes, stand in front of a camera and hope it goes viral. They've done a few other things to sort of make it go viral as well, right? So So for everyone like that, there are many other failures. And viral is like this, it's this thing that, again, it's very catchy. CEO loves this thing, or, I just want to make one video, and that's great. That's going to be my digital social campaign, and, it'll go viral, and Malaysians and Asians are going to go crazy about it, and it doesn't happen like that.
Right,
you have to be prepared to be, say that, look, here are the investments I'll make, here's how we'll think it'll go viral, so on and so forth.
Yeah, so it's less about the big flashy stuff. It's just about a proper campaign. So let's take us into another area that I'd just sort of like to get your opinion on. So social media, you look at the Facebooks and you others. When do we make money out? When does it truly become monetizable?
Since you represent Facebook in the market, maybe you want to take the first
okay. Go on then.
and I'll add on.
I think social media is already making money. If you look at Facebook's numbers, they were doing about 2.4 billion in 2010 from display advertising. By the end of this year, it'll be 4 billion plus, which means that they probably get the largest share of display advertising online. That's growing, but that in the long term, that's going to be commoditized. It's just placing ads within social networks.
Right.
I think the more important part would be how do you then leverage your communications with these guys? Because at the moment, I think a lot of people are stuck on I need 50,000 fans because my competitor has 50,000 fans. So give me 51,000, right? But what do you do with these fans? How do you engage with them and all that? And that's a big change also in terms of the way people consume content. So if you look, I think today discovery of content is a completely new field in my mind. So if you go back maybe 5 or 6 years, it's still around. Searching for content is a key part of it. But discovering content through what your friend reads, or what someone has posted on your page or stuff like that, that's important. And also the definition of content. In 5 to 10 years ago, Sajith this morning put on a blue shirt and went to Starbucks for a coffee. Was not content. Right? But today, when I go into Facebook in the morning, that's what I'm reading, right? I'm reading where this guy checked in, what this guy bought, who played what game, he needs more chickens for his Farmville, and stuff like that. That wasn't content in the past, right? So that's changing as well. Yes. What's entertaining to people and all that stuff, so yeah.
But it's precisely that coffee analogy that, I think social media is getting monetized as we speak. I mean, you don't get over $1 billion in revenue if it's not being monetized in some way. So that's been put to rest. But I think the key thing is how do brands really monetize this? Because all of us here are either on Facebook, hopefully we'll get on Google Plus and so on and so forth. And you have friend circles as well, just in real life. And my view is that you don't really think of monetizing your friends, right? Because what you think about is having conversations with your friends, and in turn you get influenced by what they say, right? So if Sri has seen a great movie, he goes and tells Tato Johan and so on and so forth, and things go. Now, you mentioned this bit about data, and you had the large circle around it. And I think the main challenge for social network is going to be how do they use the data, and you were referring to this. How do you use the data about all the conversations and then try and monetize it without seeming to be overtly, if you will, mercenary-ish about it? And that is going to be a big challenge because brands have to be careful how they engage with consumers on social media because this is a personal conversation that's going on between people. The fact that I go to Starbucks does not necessarily mean that I'm interested in Starbucks coffee.
No.
It could be that I am just going to meet somebody there, right? Or it could be that the barista just happens to be very nice looking. But the point I'm making is that it's a very personal conversation. To monetize that, one has to be careful. And I think that is the big challenge that brands today face. And I'm not quite sure any one of us has figured out what's the way to kind of do this.
Now, before I move on to the sort of what the consumer will pay for and that type of discussion, what I want to do is just to sort of take a pause there and say, most of the questioning and discussion so far has been focused on the ads part of the sort of the equation. I just want to throw it open to the audience here. I will go on to talk about what consumers will pay for in a moment, so let's leave that. But do we have any questions out there from you for our distinguished panelists, particularly on this issue of ad spending and where it's headed?
Oh, excellent.
If you
I love the fact that there are questions from the audience.
Yeah, if you can identify yourself, that would help.
Hi, my name is Zain. I'm from Wago. My question is, when we have some online ad spending, and some people might not feel it's a concretized ad campaign or message, do you feel sometimes that agencies or brands need to do an online campaign but must have some mass traditional media presence, not really as a 360 angle, but more of to concretize that campaign, to give the consumer, right, this is a proper thing going on, I'm interested in this product, as opposed to just another ad that went on social media?
So the inherent, if I may, sorry, the inherent sort of assumption in your question seems to be that anything happening online is not concrete.
It's not that concrete, but I'm saying it's not as concrete as something they would have seen on TV and then seen on online.
Okay, well, why do you say that?
I think because the online advertising part has become so saturated. So because of that, I might notice 3 ads online, but the one I also notice on print or on radio or on TV becomes the one I am more confident paying attention to as a proper campaign and not just another thing on it. Do you feel like this is true? Is it moving that way or is it moving against that way? Or are people doing the traditional part purely to tick this box? What is it?
Okay, so not for reasons that I happen to work at Google do I think that you may be wrong. But it's a couple of things. One, research shows that generally, in fact, we in Google, our search queries spike when there is a decently run offline campaign, an analog campaign. So when you've got a television commercial sort of starting, the queries for Old Spice spiked as the YouTube video views increased. But that's an online example. When newspaper advertisements happen, queries for a particular brand almost certainly spike. There's like almost a perfect correlation, right? But wouldn't you rather you have an ad appear for you at the time that you're either searching for at a time when you express an intent for that particular product or service, or at a time when you're reading something on a site that actually speaks about content in that regard? Let's take travel as an example. Let's say you were planning a trip to Bali. Usually you'll search as well, but let's say through your search experiences, you went to a site that talks about the latest attractions in Bali. Wouldn't you appreciate a banner on the side? I'm not talking about flashy, crazy banners, but just a simple banner on the side from a great hotel that offers you a deal to stay in Bali. It's very targeted, right? It's extremely targeted, it's non-intrusive, and it exactly addresses what you're saying, right? Now, contrast that with, let's say, you watching television, and you're watching Wimbledon. Now, all of a sudden, you see an ad about Bali. Why? You wanted to watch Roger Federer. You didn't want to watch anything about Bali. So I think you've got to, the notion of sort of concreteness, which is I think what your question is predicated on, is different. I think what really matters is what is your objective, right? What is really your objective as an advertiser? Is it to announce the rebranding of Celcom? And there are people from Celcom here. Well, I mean, you need to be able to do that across all media. Or, on the other hand, is it to tell people that you've got a great deal on AirAsia flights or Malaysia Airlines flights? Why wouldn't you just want to be doing that online? Because people are constantly searching for flights and deals and so on and so forth. So I don't know if that directly answers your question, but you see the point that I'm trying to make. Right?
Let's go to another question over there.
Hi, good morning. My name is Parmit. I'm from Usat Tegas. I would like to go back when you were talking about traditional media and the shift, specifically looking at print and in the mature markets. Now, print has probably been declining over the last 10 years and a lot more cyclical because of the cyclical effect in 2009. and the structural effect that's happening. I think it's also speeding up going forward. Now, how do you think, what do you recommend that newspaper publishers should do? How do they position themselves? Because the ad dollars that you make online does not add up, and it would take a long time before it actually takes over the 8x from print, for example. So how do they position themselves?
Yeah. I think it's not going to take over the kind of revenue you have on print at the moment anytime soon. Probably we'll have to have another 5 more reports like this before you start seeing that change. But one great example in the US is USA Today. If you take a look at this site, right, they made the shift to seriously consider digital and social media and all that stuff about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. When they started adding podcasts, they started adding apps, all that stuff to their site. Now, the biggest challenge they had at that point was, do we produce content fast enough for it to be relevant to an online audience? What they realized was within that first 9 months that they did that, they actually got 2 million new pieces of content completely contributed by users. And these pieces of content were comments on an article, contributions and all that stuff. Traditionally, media owners we're very precious about the content that we generate. So the content that the user generates gets limited to 1-page letter of the month or something like that, right? And today, because people are interested in what others are thinking as well, that content should be given its due time in the limelight. So I'll give you an example of a site in Germany. I don't understand a word it says because I don't read German, but it was a case study that came out in Fast Company about 4 or 5 months ago. And basically what that site did was they are actually an afternoon newspaper. So they come out around lunchtime. But what they did was they decided to leverage off online. They would release the news on their website at midnight the night before. When they release the news, they tell all the audience that you have 1 hour to give your comments. And after that 1 hour, no comments are allowed anymore. And then the editor goes through the kind of comments that they have, and they pull out a few comments and tag it to the news article to print and then circulate the newspaper at 12 o'clock the next day. By doing that, all of a sudden, traditional media has social context. Traditional media has an opinion from the general population, person like me, person like you, and all that stuff. And one thing that online very rarely has the ability to trump traditional media is when I tell my mom, hey, I appeared on this website, there's no cachet as compared to, hey mom, I'm in the newspapers, right? So you should leverage that, as traditional media leverage the, what do I tell my mom? Yeah.
And if I may just a little bit on, I'm going to take the opportunity of being on the panel, right? I think that one of the things that even sort of underlies the question is the fact that many newspapers have been very, very successful aggregations of a whole load of stuff, right? There are very few people here who can ever said they've read a newspaper in the same way that they've read a book. You start at the beginning, you end at the end, right? No one. I don't think anyone can say that. It's always been an aggregation under a trusted brand. That trusted brand, I believe, has even more hidden value, often by now disaggregating what's in the aggregation. It's still under this trusted brand because it doesn't matter whether it's news or commentary. News or commentary maybe doesn't have the same, there's a lot of places where you can get news now, right? It's commodity, but you do want, when it comes to an opinion that you can trust. Okay, so there's that. So it's splitting lifetime news from editorial. Oh, by the way, if you happen to have the best wine journalist whose column was hidden within this newspaper, well, you can monetize that point of view on good wine multiple ways that were never monetized before within this aggregation. So I believe that the question kind of relates to what things were, which was an aggregation. I believe that there's a lot more potentially to be earned through disaggregation even if that is a shift from selling space to selling an engagement. So actually looking more at the transaction-related revenues and on the path to purchase, rather than looking at space. Will space online equal space physical? No. But doesn't mean there aren't other ways of making money that are non-space related. And so I feel that it's kind of you've trapped me into a question which was about space. But actually I believe it's more around the plus rather than the space. So that would, should we take another question?
I think as a media owner, I'd like to sort of make a few comments, if
Sure.
you don't mind. 2 minutes and I'll be very fast. The Malaysian market is actually very unique. Look at the language that we are using here this morning, English, right? But the national language is Bahasa Malaysia, right? English is the commercial language. It's also the media planning language. And then there's a thriving Chinese language vernacular. Now, what happens? 2.7 million newspapers circulated a day in Malaysia. 2/3 are Bahasa Malaysia and Chinese. Actually, Chinese copies are 1 million copies a day. The least copies in the market is actually English. Okay, readership is declining. I think the Star knows this. So does the NST. No, I'm not trying to put anybody down, but I want to show you the realities of the Malaysian market. What is media planning language? English. It's not translators we need, it's transliterators, okay? Because people think in English, and what is happening to the ADEX share? 50% of the newspaper ADEX is actually going to English newspapers and not Chinese and Malay. So it's skewed the other way. So why? So it's a resource problem for us in Malaysia as well. And then if I may add, English language is the language of the net. You have only 26 alphabets, Romanized. There are 1,500 ways of entering Chinese in Chinese characters on the net. So the difficulties of using Chinese language in Malaysia, especially when you don't have complete education in the Chinese language, you have to go outside. Okay, so the interesting part that we have found as a Chinese media owner is this: they read Chinese in print and they read English and Bahasa online. So when you are doing media planning, you have to think about this, and it is not the translation of one ad into another. Okay, so these are a few points that I like to make. And going forward as media owners, of course, since you started digitalization from 1995, we were actually the first to go digital. It is in future for the interaction with the consumer, it is really through video publishing, because the short clips of video publishing and reformatting our content to go on video will be the key for newspapers. But print for vernaculars will certainly be here for some time to come. Thank you.
That's a good point. I'll come back to you. We have one more. I can't turn the audience down. You're all our clients. I can't stop you, right?
I'm Guna from the Star newspaper.
I hope this is not like an us versus them thing, No. Let me just tell you that I can't imagine a world without getting up in the morning and having a cup of tea and reading my newspaper. But that's not to say my son will do that, 10 years from now. But it shouldn't be an us versus them, yes. Just so you know that I love my newspaper as well.
I actually have a couple of questions to you,
Sure.
not a comment.
Sure.
Now, I think let me maybe put forward to you two dilemmas that we face in the print sector and see what is your response to that. Right? So one is this. I think most of you tend to think that we should not charge for content. Right? If we don't charge for content, then what do we do? If we are putting all our content online for free, then what's going to happen to our print? Eventually, as your digital penetration increases, then we will be killing our own print. The other thing is, assuming we make the successful transition to digital, what is there in the digital space which can compare with the kind of advertising that you get in print, where this advertising just jumps out at you from the page? And we find that at this point of time, there is nothing in digital that can make up for the revenue loss in print. So we will hang on to print for dear life. So what is your suggestion for this kind of a problem?
I don't think you should turn off print to do online. So that's the first part. But from a personal perspective, a print ad, you mentioned jumping out at you. I actually represent a lot of the newspapers, including yours, for ad sales. And we do a good job at it because people are looking for your audience. But in terms of what can be done online and that engagement and all that, it's not just about the advertisement, because video can play, things can jump out at you, shift your screen, all that stuff, call you by name and all that. Even tell you, your mom saw this ad before, so you better know what it is when you talk to her at dinner. That kind of stuff is there. More importantly is really, I think the audience is there. And already, even for your efforts online, the Star Online and all that stuff, great efforts, you're already monetizing that. No doubt it is nowhere close to the kind of revenue you make on print, right? But no one's saying that you need to stop doing the newspaper to focus on online. There will come a time where the audience will naturally, you may start seeing a much higher circulation of your website than you do of your print. And then when advertisers wake up, the fact that you guys have already done it, right, is you are in a great position to take advantage of that. So I don't think it's all doom and gloom. However, on the subscription side of it, the uniqueness of content is the thing that people are willing to pay for. So like you mentioned just now, if I'm given the option for free content, and if the same content I had to pay for, I'd go for free. There's no reason that would make me pay for exactly the same content. So the question will be about branding content and the difference between that content.
I think also just on that point, sir, the sort of, I think the case that you're making is if you will, the sort of big splash you can make on a newspaper, right? And I think the argument, the counter argument to that would be, what about relevancy, right? Because when the newspaper goes out, so there are different sort of spectrum of the population, if you will, are reading that newspaper, and they all have different needs. So let's say if you had a half-page ad or a full-page color ad of Volvo, of an automobile, only a very small percentage of your audience at that time, the newspaper reader, are likely to be interested in purchasing an automobile. That is not the case, or that case can be, the dilution of the ad dollar is vastly reduced online because you can make it very targeted, such that it only appears to people who actually have expressed an interest in purchasing an automobile. So that's point number one. But two, the main thing is, the fact is, print is incredibly powerful just because of the habit that it creates. And I think we're thinking about this in today's terms, in our daily experience. The real question really is, we've got to think 10, 12, 15 years out, when the children who are growing up today, they are unlikely to pick up newspapers to interact with the Star or with Sinchu. That would be my hypothesis. They are likely more prone to pick up the iPad that, Dr. Johan's nephews have. And they're likely to be very, very, active consumers of that, and they'd love to engage with it. The time is not far off when actually what you could charge for is asking questions to the editor live, right? 5-10 years away, that's the sort of revenue models I think that's going to happen, when you can engage with the writers of content live, or you can engage with, having your questions answered live, so on and so forth.
I don't foresee us getting a lot of revenue from that.
Yeah, so I think that's the point that Rene was trying to make. Yeah. The point is not to be able to, you're trying to sort of, again, we're viewing this as a zero-sum game. I think the time when advertisers recognize that you now have a very core audience that now, interact with your website and your content, they'll be more than prepared to start to, the ad dollars will follow. What you're thinking about today, we face this on a day-to-day basis today, because all the data keeps telling us that there are more and more consumers online, but the ad dollars don't follow. You see what I mean?
And I come back to the comment I was making before. I think we're defining ad dollars too narrowly here. This is not about space. This is about interaction with consumers and how do you monetize that. That can either be through, a revenue share, or there will be intermediate steps. So I worry that sometimes we're looking at this by defining advertising too narrowly. That the revenue models of the future won't be around space, it'll be around engagement. And the interesting thing, I ran a session in the States recently, and we had, usual panel of youngsters, and a girl got up, she said, I really reject this notion that I don't read newspapers. She said, I reject it. She said, I just don't get my hands dirty. Right? And she explained, it was kind of obvious, right? But she then explained how she engaged with news brands, right? So unfortunately, we talk about newspapers. We should be talking about brands here. Trusted brands, news brands, entertainment brands.
Yeah. Which is why, Marcel, you've got in the newspaper world itself, you've got free newspapers, right? They don't have any subscription. They're just ad funded. You've got newspapers happening like that, but I think it's the brand, because people want to wake up to the star, so to speak, right? I may be overstating it a bit, but you get the idea. People want to wake up to the star.
Let's go back to the audience.
Just a quick comment. Actually, newspaper companies in future could decouple from print.
Correct. News brands.
And become just content producers. That
Correct.
could happen. And reading on print could be a premium product. It could happen that way.
Could be.
Eminently possible. I can see myself paying for that, by the way.
Yeah, so can I. Let's go to the lady there.
Hi, my name is Feng Yi. I'm from The Age. Rita is my dear friend from Sinchu, and I concur with her observation of what's happening to the readership and circulation of newspaper all over the world. On that note, I thought it would be nice. This is a good time for me to share a little bit of good news insofar as Age is concerned. We're happy to tell you that in the year 2010, we have managed to go against the herd. Our circulation actually has grown. And that's audited ABC figures. And for the unaudited ABC figures for the first half of this year, the trend has continued. We are continuing to grow. Yeah. So it's not across the board. It's not across the board. Sure. But after having said that, I totally agree with all the views that have been put forth today. And on that note again, we have to say that even as a niche newspaper that is still growing, we are going digital, and please keep tuning in.
I read the Edge email alert every day, by the way, and I love it.
And for the print, you don't get your fingers dirty. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to go for one last question.
I do. I'm Siaping from The Star, but I'm going to ask a question about TV. You mentioned in there that TV subscription is likely to grow at, I think, 9% or so.
Yeah.
On what basis is that projection on? Thank you.
There's some element of ARPU. It's a fairly detailed question, but it's a combination of some ARPU growth and some IPTV revenues, as well as some pickup from mobile. But we can give you the detail. Let's go to one final question, because I know I hate to leave a man. And that will be the final
person
question.
shall be left behind, so to speak.
Thank you. That's actually two questions. I'll make it quick. Basically, I've tweeted about the subject matter, and I've got some replies, and most of them come back with the fact that business owners and top management are not confident of basically putting a lot of money on their online ads expenditure. And this is due to the confidence from the management themselves. They're afraid that the accountability factor, when you spend on newspapers and stuff, you get estimates of numbers. When you spend on online tools and mediums, you get numbers. So what if the expectation is not exactly not what you wanted, and then you have to declare this to the board members and things like that. So on that note, do you think it's affected the numbers and ad expenditures? And but number two is about the language. I'm interested to find out if the statistics showed just now has basically is divided through the language as well, not just the tools. Because I'm actually a lot very active in a lot of the social media space in Malaysia, and I found out that a lot of hashtags, a lot of trends starts growing very big when it comes to the Malay language. And this has shown time and time again with, in fact, the latest trend, which is Saya generasi, yeah. That exploded. You know, it went on #1 top trending globally. Just for people to share about, you know, at my generation, what was it, what happened, and things like this happen. So, you know, it'd be interesting to see, you know, if we can get the stats, you know, in languages. So thanks.
Okay. Closing comments, gents, quick, 12 words, anything you want to say?
You go.
Imagine this is a Twitter, come on.
Oh, no, so very quickly, just in Google alone, we tend to see an increasing trend in terms of Malay language queries, so obviously people are this. But the reality of the fact is, and I think the lady here was referring to that, the English language web is much more robust than the vernacular web. And that's just a function of how much content gets created. That's right.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll answer your two questions and that'll be the summary. First thing is I think brands need to understand that the status quo is not going to stay the same forever. So experimental budgets where there are no KPIs, put aside 4 or 5%. Just do it to know what's going to be big next time. If you are always afraid of what the numbers are going to tell you, you're never going to try anything new. And everyone's going to do the same thing over and over and over again, right? So be ready for what's coming next. That's the first one. The second one is, for some reason in Malaysia, when we advertise online and in Malay language websites, the response is about 4 or 5 times higher than on English language websites. Yep. I'll leave it to you guys to decide what that means. Yep.
And with that, I'd like to thank both you gentlemen and ask all of you to thank them, and thank you very much.